I'm trying a new presentation technique today. I've written copious notes, so I'll be interested in your comments at the end as to whether I'm looking like that or whether I'm looking like you're looking at you. I'm an engagement professional, so I pride myself on trying to look at people and talk with people rather than read my notes. So, having said that, my presentation today is to talk about the engagement aspect of the IS ratings, to look at some tools that... We're right? Oh, I didn't wear my heels today. Thank you. To understand the background to a couple of other tools that are used to evaluate engagement, and to cover a couple of case studies, looking at each of the case studies in application, each of the tools in application, and to look at where to from here. So I'm proud to be part of ISCA and in some small way contributing to its mission of improving the productivity and livability of industry and communities through sustainability in infrastructure. I looked on the website recently and saw 20,510 tonnes of carbon saved, 2,966 megalitres of water saved, 983,148 tonnes of carbon dioxide saved through materials reduction. I'm really jealous because when it comes to the people aspects of an infrastructure project, we don't have anything like that. We don't get the numbers like that. And what I'm really interested in is understanding the changes or benefits for people and society resulting from infrastructure projects. The central premise of social capital as a concept from the 1990s is that social networks have value. And Thomas Sander is a researcher, and if you're a tweeter, look him up, because he tweets very regularly, not as fast as Donald Trump, but quite frequently, and he talks about social capital and civic engagement. And those two terms were very closely aligned together in the 1990s when the engagement material started to emerge. He's one of us. He drinks decaf, takes fast, eco-friendly showers and shuns valet parking. Not that I have done valet parking recently, but for those of you who have an opportunity, he's one of us who walks past the valet parking. And what Thomas Sander says is that the collective value of all social networks, that is, who people know, and the inclinations that arise from those networks to do things for each other is what we're talking about. So how does social capital work? Social capital might mean warm and cuddly feelings for some of us, but also a wide variety of quite specific benefits that flow from the trust, the reciprocity, the two-way flow, the information and cooperation associated with social networks. So what I put to you is that social capital creates value for the people who are connected, and I suggest for infrastructure projects for bystanders as well. So let's think about some examples of social capital. Apparently, it could only happen in New York, but the Hasidic Jews trade diamonds without having to test each gem for purity. And that's social capital in action. Social capital in action that we might see on a daily basis are email exchanges amongst members of a cancer support group or a lobby group. I suggest to you that social capital, this group, is a group creating social capital. People talking to each other over the morning break, we're creating social capital between individuals. And in project teams, we have social capital, in communities and people affected by projects. So that's one thing. But I have to say that as an expert qualitative researcher, I can share with you that measuring those aspects, such as social capital, is a very imperfect science. So I don't get the luxury of adding up to 20,510 tonnes of CO2 because I can't capture the value of the social connections that you've made today. What I am going to talk about is two ways that organisations have included the aspect of social capital by using value as a construct for their engagement. So engagement reflects also the people aspects of a project, not only the one-to-one contact with individual community members or business people, but more complex relationships and engagement with groups, and it might be lobby groups, as well as decision makers, so the people who are responsible for making decisions about your project. So with infrastructure projects, we know that stakeholder engagement has wider impacts on ISCA ratings such as management systems, people's health, wellbeing and safety, and on innovations. Stakeholder engagement is assessed via the ISCA rating by international standards, and we can get a score. Successful stakeholder engagement will enhance a successful infrastructure project. But are we capturing the whole picture? We have seen that stakeholder engagement and associated social capital has the capacity to derail projects. Not in Western Australia, we've seen that, and in other states and around the world, where enough community action can derail a very significant project. Some of us would say that's a negative impact of social capital, but others would say that's a very positive result of community action at work. So let's look at the current measurement tools in infrastructure projects. So ISCA has adopted the International Association of Public Partition framework to rate stakeholder engagement and participation. This tool dates back to 1998 and developed its core values for public participation as the fundamental building block for engagement, practice and measurement. Main Roads in WA in 2006 established the first pilot of its value assurance reviews for major projects. And the purpose of the pilots was to strengthen what was then called community consultation at any stage in the project life cycle. Like all of you, and we've heard several people talk already today about other frameworks that they use in their evaluation methodologies, and the one that I'm drawing on today is the Australasian Evaluation Society Guidelines for the Ethical Conduct of Evaluations. So that helps me to frame all the work that I do in the ethical construct. I mention this as the abstract term value has an ethical aspect, which is very relevant for all social measuring. For example, in establishing its VAR program in 2006, Main Roads WA set out the fundamentals of these reviews as measuring congruence with its own community engagement standards, including its own values. So that what's called the VAR framework is based on community engagement principles, and what's unique about this model is that it can be used at any stage of the project. So this means that it isn't just a reflective assessment, but also a predictive assessment. And it has been varied over the years since 2006 and adopted continuous improvement characteristics and is now very much embedded in Main Roads' procurement processes. Thinking of a word, what is the word? Procurement, of course. So it's now become mainstream. But in 2006, the words were community consultation. And over the years, the VAR has morphed to reflect the increasing sophistication of terminology to stakeholder participation and then stakeholder engagement. And we're seeing that ISCA's rating tool is following a progressive morphing as we become more sophisticated in measuring stakeholder engagement. The question in my mind, which I'm sharing with you today, is a future morph to include a value tool, a value assessment. So the case study that I'm going to talk about in relation to Main Roads WA was the business case for the Mitchell Freeway Extension project, So the major project is $261.4 million. The contract was awarded in 2015 and construction commenced mid that year with estimated project completion later this year. My involvement was well before that, when the project business case development was being undertaken in 2012, and my role was the independent evaluator. This aspect was a strongly engagement-focused process which was supported at executive government level. The community reference group, which has now morphed into a construction reference group, consisted of 25 people from the local community. And the intention of having a value assurance review for such an early stage of the project was to help validate the engagement for external review. Also, Main Roads were keen to include innovation, such as real-time evaluation and participant surveys after each community reference group. So by the time that people in the CRG were invited to comment on how they felt the last meeting went, send those back to me for evaluation, I was able to capture their views about the social capital engendered in each CRG meeting. Real-time evaluation means I was at every meeting watching as an observer. Sounds good, but it's a very simple process. As the process evolved, it was decided that the VAR report would be included in the business case as evidence of the value and robustness of that process. The flexibility of the VAR process is that feedback was provided to project staff at each evaluation point. For example, after each CRG meeting, I would receive the evaluation sheets and talk with project staff about how they could adapt this process to overcome any identified flaws or opportunities for continuous improvement. I think I've heard the term, an opportunity for improvement is like a box of chocolates. And that was a bit of sometimes difficult for project staff to have to hear feedback about ways they could improve. The business case ended up being successful, and the project is, as I said, in construction as we speak. IAP2, the International Association for Public Participation in Australasia, commenced activities in 1998, and they form the backbone of the ISCA rating tool for engagement. So what is happening now with the ISCA upgrade of the engagement ratings is that some work that's currently being undertaken looking at how IAP2 has progressed since 1998 and the advances in evaluating engagement. So I'm looking forward to looking at the draft material later this year on engagement to see how it's moved on. So the City of Melville uses the IAP2 framework in its stakeholder engagement policy, and as such they were interested in the idea of identifying the value of their engagement activities. So they approached me to do a mid-project review of engagement for the Shirley Strickland Oval concept plan, as there'd been a few hiccups along the way. The initial engagement had occurred and development of the draft concept plan was in train, hence the opportunity to review the initial engagement at this hiatus point. They were very pleased that I could adapt the IAP2 quality standard, which was released last year, comprising 68 elements as the measuring tool, to better reflect the policy in this piece of work. So that they had done training with their councillors on the IAP2 tool, and so what it meant was that the report that I produced was going to come back to them using the same language and using the same framework. So similar to other speakers today, for that particular client, I've got 5 minutes, right, moving on, it was a very good tool to use. So what the CEO was keen to have was for me to run a ruler over their process to assure city councillors of the value of their process. So while that quality standard is a clunky measuring tool with 68 elements, it's far too many and very repetitive, it was being used for the first time, so therefore an innovative approach. And the city was pleased that they could then use that and then move on in terms of their future evaluation processes. So I've talked about the ISCA ratings for stakeholder engagement, the Main Roads WA VAR model and the IAP2 quality standard. Each of these provides an assessment of engagement. Some can be used flexibly at any time during the project and can identify opportunities for improvement. Others are used more specifically at the end of the project. Each have a rating capacity, converting aspects of social capital to a numerical result. In terms of where to from here, IAP2 are developing an audit tool. So that will be a comprehensive audit of their core values, their quality standard, and we're expecting that to emerge later this year. The Value Assurance Review tool at Main Roads is still alive. However, Main Roads also has adopted the ISCA model and is keeping the jury out on the adoption of other models along the way in terms of evaluating engagement. And as I've mentioned, ISCA is currently updating its tool. So in terms of value capture, I just want to reiterate that engagement is about the people aspect of the project, not only the project staff, but the individual community members or business people and groups, including lobby groups, as well as decision makers. Sometimes we forget about decision makers as being part of the engagement. So on that basis, values, as well as value, is a key construct which can measure social capital. The two case studies demonstrate that an assessment of the value of engagement has value for project governance, for process improvement, for project funding and approval. And these are only three of the many aspects of engagement values. In evaluating value of stakeholder engagement, as in the two case studies discussed today, it is very likely that in the future, ISCA ratings could identify engagement value for project proponents and answers. And I'll leave you with my last thought. The big question unanswered is which of the many available tools will be adapted to achieve this? Thank you.